Democrats have a patriotism problem, therefore we all have a patriotism problem. We'll talk about that tonight. Megyn Kelly joins us, Josh Philipp, Allie Beth Stuckey. We are jam-packed. What a show tonight on I'm Right. All right, so let's have a discussion about patriotism and why it actually matters. You know, there's that old fairly crappy Beatles song, Love Is All You Need. It's not always true, but the basics behind the song, the premise behind the song, it is true. You know, if you love your job, if you love what you do, maybe you don't have a natural talent for it, maybe there's a lot of things you have to learn, but you love what you do, you'll get better at it over time, and you'll almost undoubtedly be a success. The love being the ingredient in there will kind of drive everything else. Your marriage, if you have one. Maybe finances will hit hard, maybe health problems, maybe kid problems, maybe all kinds of things happen. But if you love each other, you'll get through that, weather that storm. Now, vice versa. What if the love isn't there? You know, what if you're uniquely talented at your job, you just happen to be really good at it? You don't like it. In fact, kind of hate it. You hate the job, you hate the company. It really doesn't matter how talented you are. You're not going to end up being a success. Your marriage. You know, she's so pretty, he's so handsome, money's coming in, kids are doing good, straight A's, got a fresh new, brand new SUV in the driveway. Life is good, right? But kind of hate each other. It's not going to last. You won't make it. It is a necessary ingredient for the success of anything. And it most definitely is for the success of a nation. A nation must have its citizens love it. It absolutely must. Without that, the nation is on a short-term future. That is just the ugly truth. A poll just came out from Gallup. It showed patriotism from 2001 till now. Okay, so a little more than 20 years, 25 years, quarter century of patriotism. Of course, it's not really surprising. Democrats were always a little lower than Republicans. But Barack Obama leaves office. We now are in a situation where 36% of Democrats are proud to be an American. So Republicans, for all the problems they may have, and most definitely do have, Republican voters in general are proud to be Americans, love the country. And Democrat voters, overwhelmingly, we're not talking about a tiny majority here, overwhelmingly, Democrats despise the United States of America. Now, let's get past all the other things. Well, of course, I already knew that. Let's get past all that and let's drill down on this. How long do you think we can last like this? And no, I'm not telling you there's going to be a civil war tomorrow or something like that, or the country's going to collapse next year. I'm not saying that at all. But let's think on a macro level, because you're going to die one day, and so am I. Our children, we'll have children, and their children. We do like to consider them, right? 100 years from now, we don't even have to go distant future. That's a century. 100 years from now, are we still going to be here like this? If Democrats hate the United States of America, if half the country hates the country, can you keep being a country? I would argue you cannot. I would argue this is a national crisis that exceeds maybe any national crisis we've ever seen in the United States of America, ever. And look, we're going to have Megyn Kelly on in a few minutes. And well, I'm going to ask her about, what she thinks is the why. There are obviously so many different ingredients to this, from education to the media and Hollywood, and there's a spiritual element to it. Americans stop going to church, and look, if we have to give credit, bad credit, but credit where credit is due, we should point to the Obamas. We've had many presidents in the history of this country, some wonderful, some patriotic, some very bad and horrible, but Barack Obama and his wife, they were the first ones who ever walked into the White House who really had a genuine hatred for the place. That was how they were raised. That was their entire background. And they spent 8 years taking an axe to this country. I mean, this was the First Lady?
For the first time in my adult lifetime, I'm really proud of my country. And not just because Barack has done well, but because I think people are hungry for change.
Think about that statement. Educated woman, a career. She was never proud to be an American until America chose her husband. What a statement. Still out there trashing it to this day. And you know what? I actually want to give credit to Jake Tapper for maybe saying something that was so incredibly revealing when he dropped this. Why is it Democrats hate the country? Here it was.
Going back 9 years, I'm thinking back to when I covered Obama at the White House, and President Obama gave a speech one time criticizing Paul Ryan's Medicaid plan or Medicare plan. Paul Ryan I think he was chairman of the House Budget Committee, and he was in the audience, and Obama was criticizing his plan. And you would have thought that he killed his puppy.
No, but that's
from
what
the
I'm saying.
reaction.
It's like it's totally different.
Well, here's my question: are we ever going back to normal? Are we ever coming back to a place where you can't just call the other party crazy in the State of the Union address?
Are we ever going back? These people want you to imagine that we can go back to a wonderful time where we were all very, very unified, except what do they mean by that? They don't mean unifying. They don't mean stop the division. They mean your subjugation. That's what they mean when they talk like that. When you were forced to bend the knee, when you had to sit there and listen to vile crap like this. Remember when Joe Biden said this to you?
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic. No matter what the white supremacists and the extremists say.
We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin, and your refusal has cost all of us. And by the way, if they want to think to take on government if we get out of line, which they're talking again about, well, guess what? They need F-15s. They don't need a rifle.
Our patience is wearing thin with you. I've got F-15s. What do people like Jake Tapper mean when they say they want to go back? Well, for them, real joy, real America is when you are completely powerless, constantly threatened and lectured by them, when they have complete and total control to tear this country apart the way they want. Then we are united. It's a wonderful time to be together. But anytime they're not free to run the communist revolution, then you're being divisive. It's a very, very, very evil, manipulative tactic that evil, manipulative people use. You've probably seen this in your office at some point in time. God forbid you've been in a relationship like this at some point in your life. The nastiest, most divisive people, one of their favorite tactics in the world is accusing you of being divisive. But back to the question at hand. How do we continue on for another 100 years when half the country's trying to burn it down? If I share a home with my wife and she wants to burn the house to the ground, can I stop her for a while? Hopefully. I'll follow her around with a fire extinguisher. I'll be patting out the curtains. I can probably keep the home upright for a while, but 50 years from now, is our home still going to be standing? That's probably not realistic. I'm not sure, and I'm going to ask Megyn Kelly in a second, but I'm not sure how exactly we got here. There's a lot to it, I realize that. But what I am 100% sure of is we will not have a long-term future as a country if half the country, if Democrats continue to hate it. We just can't live like that as a nation. Joining me now, the incredible Megyn Kelly, which of course everybody knows Megyn Kelly by this point in time on the Megyn Kelly channel, the Megyn Kelly show. She's just everywhere, and we are better people for it. Megyn, okay, Gallup poll comes out, shows Democrats started to hate the country about the second Donald Trump got elected. We now have a 36% problem, as in only 36% of Democrats love the country. Megyn, maybe a long answer. How did we get here?
I mean, it explains a lot, but I would start at schools. I mean, they've been made to hate the country from very early ages for decades now. And it was mostly in the universities for a while, and now it has spread to K through 12 education as well. And I think, unlike Republicans, there's no counter programming in Democrat homes anymore. You know, it used to be that you'd learn to love the country through your parents. And even the Democrats would take you to church where that message would be reinforced. And their commercials would reinforce it. And the sporting activities would reinforce it. And, you know, you just lived in America and you learned to love it because it was sort of a ubiquitous message. I think that stopped a long time ago. And I think the right will continue to reinforce it at home, making sure the kids celebrate 4th of July and stand up for the national anthem and honor their country as they should. And the left doesn't, because they bought into the lie that America's uniquely bad instead of uniquely good. And they're taking some sort of pleasure in the division that comes from that. They feel like there's meaning in their little lives that otherwise are meaningless to them. At least they've got a cause now, which is to tear down like the evil government or this evil place that didn't allow them to succeed in the way that they should have or they wanted to, as opposed to taking personal responsibility, which is another right-wing conservative value, not so much on the left. And here we are. And by the way, you know, I remember being on the air at Fox News in 2012, 2014, talking about what was happening in the university, saying that this has to stop. We used to call it political correctness back then. It has to stop. You know, like if this spreads, it's going to be a real cancer on our society. And look where we are. Just, you know, some 15 years later, not even 10, whatever. It has spread. It's gotten really pernicious, and it's eaten an entire generation of young people on the left.
Megyn, two questions, almost the same one, but where did we fail? When I say we, I'm talking about me, hardcore partisan right-wingers. Where did we fail in stopping this? Did we fail? Where did we fail? And do we have any ability to correct it? Because I'm not a Democrat. I'm not going to vote Democrat. I'm not going to be a university professor. I don't even have the intelligence for that. Where did we fail, and can we fix it? Or are we banking on these nutballs fixing themselves?
I think, honestly, we failed in pursuing, you know, with all due respect to George W. Bush like republicanism when we were in charge for too many years, where we were neo-connie and we were Chamber of Commerce people and we were talking about an immigration overhaul that might include amnesty. And we wanted to be liked by the other side. We wanted to create a bunch of wars that killed a bunch of people, but we wanted to be liked by the other side. And we didn't engage on these cultural battles. The Republicans engaged on the issue of life. That was it. And kind of ceded everything else, and like tisked the so-called culture wars as beneath them, and therefore lost them. It's one of the reasons why Donald Trump was so popular when he first came on the national scene. Like, what is this? You know, like my exchange with him at that presidential debate on like, you've said the things about women. And he was like, I think people are sick of how politically correct we've gotten, was his answer. You know, what I say is what I say. And it was a new dawn in the Republican Party and in the country. And we are very, very late to this party. You know, I mean, this party's almost over. And the booze is gone. People are stoned out of their minds, and they're all kind of wasted to the point where their brains aren't functioning normally. So it's going to be tough to get those paddles out and revive them, but we must at least try. So I think what we're doing now is the right prescription. You know, we are out there fighting the culture wars. We are no longer ceding them. We're fighting in the schools. We're filing lawsuits to try to undo some of the trans mania that they sneaked in. We are fighting on the cultural front when it comes to love of country. We're fighting when it comes to religion. We're reminding people that having a connection to something greater than yourself is actually not only good for you, but it's part of the prescription for the country when it's ailing. We're shaming people who try to shame us over our flag and our patriotism, you know, and we're teaching our kids to do it too. Like we're trying to inoculate our kids now before they go off to school, which is important. So they know what battles to fight. And we've made it kind of cool to be right wing, to be a lover of country. That was a big hurdle too. Because before we were just doing self-flagellation, like we're sorry, we're Republican, we're right wing, but we're sorry about it. You know, like it's really just because of taxes. And now we've learned these people are animals. Like we actually have to fight every single battle in every single possible way we can, whether it's in the church and in the pews, but in the courts and in the court of public opinion as well. Like everywhere, we have to say all the things we've been secretly thinking so that everybody knows they're not alone and that it is a battle and we need every last man and woman.
Megyn, Donald Trump had a wonderful speech on Tuesday night. I know this because my wife, who's much more of a normie, not a political geek like I am, loved it. She doesn't even really care about that stuff. She said, it was great, it was patriotic. He had a great night. Does that translate, and conversely, Democrats had a bad night, they can't help themselves. Does that translate to midterm elections, which aren't until November, and as you well know, we all have an attention span about that big anymore?
I don't think so. Unfortunately, no. I think it may have stopped the bleeding for Trump because his poll numbers were really dramatically heading in the wrong direction as he went into the State of the Union. So he got out there and reminded people that he's actually very funny, very likable, kind of lovable. I mean, the TDSers will never see it, but I think if you're like a normie independent, you're like, you know what, I do like him. So that was good for the president, just to get out there and remind you like why you voted for him if you're an independent. But really, the only thing that's going to save the Republicans in the midterms is the economy. That's it. Like, you look at those polls on Tuesday, there is only one thing voters care about, and it's their wallet. And everything else is a distant second, third, fourth, whatever. It was like the economy in double digits, high 40s or 50s. And the next closest thing was immigration at 13%. Crimes, not even registering. Foreign policy, not even on the dial. So there's only one way Trump can save and help the Republicans save themselves, and that is people have got to feel that there's an economic turnaround. It's very hard to do with the inflation Trump inherited in the grocery stores and these bread and butter issues. He's trying. The tariffs, it's a mixed bag. It's possible that if he stops with the tariffs, people might feel some short-term a short-term bomb that might bring Republicans over the edge. But I don't know. I think sort of the script has been written, and I'd be shocked if we see anything other than a bloodbath in November.
Yeah, I sadly don't disagree with you. Where do we go from there? They're not going to have the Senate. We all know they're going to freak, and it'll be a new impeachment thing every day. But we're not passing legislation now either. It's not that I want it to happen, but is it the end of the world?
Totally agree with you. No, it's not. I've been asking that same question. I know it's not great. We're going to have investigations all the time. Not for nothing, but as a news person, that's kind of interesting. But I digress. That we are going to have not just Trump impeached, but every cabinet member will be impeached. It won't go anywhere because the trial takes place in the Senate, and there will never be a conviction with a Republican control. But yeah, there'll be no legislation passed whatsoever, and no attempt to pass legislation. So it's going to be a stymieing of what's left of President Trump's agenda. It's going to be annoying. There'll be zero chance for bipartisan compromise and any legislation. And so Trump will continue ruling by executive action. His critics would say fiat. And sadly, that's been one of the complaints many of us have had about the Trump reign so far, which is as much as we love those executive orders, and I can't think of one I disagree with, they're going to be erased just as soon as the next person takes office, if it's a Dem. So we might only have 2 years left of not transing the kids anymore and not building the disgusting windmills on every ocean, ruining the skyline and killing the whales and dumping toxins into the water, just to pick a couple. Not to mention opening up the energy capabilities of the United States so that it's drill, baby, drill, and we actually are self-sufficient and the gas prices are under $2 in places. I don't know. It's kind of depressing to think about, but it was always foretold, because let me tell you something, Jesse. As much as we may like Trump on the right, it's not that we don't criticize him. I've heard you criticize him. I've criticized him too. But it's as much as we net really love Trump. He is divisive, and people get sick of him. So independents they're not calling themselves Republicans for a reason. You know, they're not really hard partisans. They're sick of thinking about Trump. He takes up a lot of the oxygen in the nation. And so we saw this at the end of his first term too. Like, while he was doing fine before COVID hit, once COVID hit, they were ready to move on from him like jiffy quick. And it couldn't have been because they entirely blamed Trump for COVID. It was just, they saw him on the TV every day. They were reminded that Trump needs nonstop attention. And like, they got sick of thinking about their president, I think. And so I think Republicans are going to be up against that for the next couple of years. And we should not be assuming anything about 2028 as a result of this.
Yeah. It's amazing how fast that's coming. Megyn, thank you for everything. As always, you're the best. Appreciate you. All right. Proud of us. I was listening to Megyn talk about how we finally engaged in culture wars, and I'm proud of us, you and me. I never used to. At least where it came to spending my money, I never used to. I just didn't do it. And then, I don't know, what, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I started to notice corporate America getting involved in all these commie causes, and I realized I'm paying them for that. They're using my money for all that filth. Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile still do this all the time with your money. They take your money and they throw it at the grossest stuff imaginable. Are you paying for it? That next drag queen story hour, did you fund it when you paid your cell phone bill? Switch to Pure Talk. You never have to worry about that. You never have to stress that headline because Pure Talk shares your values, promotes your values, loves your country, charges you less. puretalk.com/JesseTV. We'll be back.
It was reported that you and Susie Wiles met with cabinet officials to kind of talk to them about the midterms and the messaging and the strategy for the administration. What is your message to the cabinet officials? How can we expect them to be used going into the 2026 midterms?
The message, going into the rest of the year is that we want to keep making life more affordable for working families again.
I like that. Feels like an adjustment. Joining me now, Joshua Philipp, host of the Josh Philipp Show. Josh, I'll tell you what, we intend to make life more affordable a lot more than the economy's great and prices are down. Quit whining about it. I think it's a much smarter strategy.
It is. I think what really matters at the end of the day is what people feel. The reality is you can talk about international politics, you can talk about wars, people's day-to-day lives, for the average voter, that's what matters most. And so it's smart they're actually going back to these discussions.
Josh, let's talk about the international aspect to it. And I don't know where you fall on the whole Iran thing, nor do I actually care, because that's not the premise of the question. I feel like this is politically very dangerous for the Trump administration because people don't care. I hang out with normal people. I don't hang out with political people. That's not who I hang out with. None of them have ever a single time mentioned Iran to me. They don't care about it. They care about gas prices and grocery prices and that Aiden, Jaden, and Braden have a job. They care about a variety of things, but Iran has never one time ever come up in conversation. So how do you sell that?
In my personal take, I don't think the Trump administration is doing a very good job on explaining it either. But I can tell you someone who's been covering national security and Chinese espionage for 18 years now, including investigating the networks right here in New York City. Iran is very important when it comes to international subversion, especially Latin America. And if Trump wants to restore the Monroe Doctrine, Iran, Russia, and China are like the three main things they have to deal with. Hezbollah networks throughout Latin America, Iranian assassin networks in the United States, their cooperation with the drug cartels, which is not very well known. But they even have training camps in parts of Mexico. They have political parties, and countries like Peru, for example, they have a Hezbollah political party. Extremely powerful regional country. Also, in terms of international war strategy, they're kind of the puppeteers behind global terrorism. It's why every time they get their money back, you see a resurgence of global terrorism. I think Trump understands this. I think Trump gets this. I don't think he's done a very good job explaining it. And especially when it comes to him talking about making a deal on nuclear weapons, because he was one of the big critics of that under Biden and Obama. So obviously he knows they won't follow agreements on that front. So I don't know what he's getting at with that. I do believe, though, that they understand the importance of Iran, not as a regional problem, but as an international problem.
Yes, why did Josh Philipp of the Josh Philipp Show just explain it to me better in about 45 seconds than anybody in the White House, including Donald Trump himself? Honestly, I'm being glib, but I'm not. That was wonderful. Now, that's an explanation the American people will understand. They're here. They're influencing Latin America. They're there. You talk about nuclear weapons and things like that. When we were just told 10 minutes ago we completely wiped out their nuclear program, now we have to send the entire it's being sold poorly. And I don't even have a stance on it, honestly. But man, if one American dies over there, the midterms are going to be even worse than we can imagine.
Yeah, and that is really the case too. Like the Trump admin, this is what they're risking, okay? They're risking going in, attacking Iran. The rumor was going around that the reason Trump backed off recently when they had the mass protests on the streets and such, the reason they backed off is they were not guaranteed leadership decapitation. Like they weren't guaranteed a transition of power with like a single strike, which would mean that Iran would launch attacks on all of our military bases. And they're an assassination problem. Like I'm in New York City right now. They arrested an Iranian agent just a couple of years back who was accused of hiring an Eastern European mafia to carry out an assassination in New York, in Queens, actually. They were working on assassinations where they're trying to contract people again in Washington, D.C. They were trying to take out some like Israeli official, and then they wanted to launch some terror attack afterwards. They're actually a domestic threat. The other big thing is the drug trade. I mentioned the cartels. The cartels are not just gangs. Drugs are not about money. Drugs are about control through corruption, and they're kind of like the off-grid currency for international crime and terrorism, right? Like the surface purpose for drugs is money. The international, like big powers like China, Russia, Iran, Cuba, the reason they're in it is because if you can create corruption, whoever controls the corruption controls the country. Drugs are a tool. And so Iran's very heavily tied in with that too. I think if Trump doesn't properly explain this and he goes in and bombs Iran and they counterattack and kill, as you mentioned, even one American soldier at one of our bases, it's going to look bad on him. In terms of actual nuclear threats and military power, Iran is mostly only a regional threat. It's mostly just a threat to Israel. And, in American politics right now, it's become, on both sides of the aisle, a really contentious issue. But I do think the Trump administration needs to explain it a lot more broadly in terms of, hey, this is why it matters to you, the voter, and this is why it matters domestically for America.
Josh, why can't Americans afford a house?
Well, age-old question, I guess. The American system, at least in my take, was kind of designed from the beginning like that. The way the Founding Fathers set up our government is basically it's very difficult to do anything. Not only do you have Congress, you used to not have the House and Senate. It was just, one branch of Congress. You used to have Congress, the executive branch, the legislative branch, and then the sheriffs, and then a whole bunch of rogue states, basically trying to challenge everything that anybody tries doing. The idea the American Founding Fathers set in place was like they did not want the system to be changed too much. So if you try to change the system, you better have a good reason to do it. That kind of bites us sometimes when we're trying to do things like, in my opinion, like voter integrity or making sure that illegals are not voting in our elections. I think that's kind of a basic issue. But when it comes to a lot of other things, I'm kind of glad it's difficult to get anything done. But I think that's built into the kind of DNA of our system.
Josh, you talk about foreign fraud, scam centers in Asia. Apparently the State Department's finally on this. Now, this is not a huge deal to, I realize, some people, but I realize that old people especially are taken in and wiped out by this crap all the time, and it angers me to no end. Can you talk about this?
Yeah, so I'm sure everybody's gotten these scam calls. Like I get multiple a day. I have my ringer turned off just permanently because I get so many. I get at least 3 scam calls a day and probably a couple emails every single day. This has become a multi-trillion-dollar business, about over $1 trillion every single year, right? Just in Burma, they're saying they have over 120,000 scammers, like employees of scam rings. You have about 300,000 known just in parts of Asia. Like, this is massive. Not to mention in India, where you have God knows how many, and a lot in Latin America. In Mexico, it's a huge business now where gangs are setting up scam centers. A lot of the people they have working for these, so a lot of the scam centers, maybe except for India, where it's run like a normal business, although it's illegal, but a lot of the scam centers are actually set up by criminal organizations. Like they're mafia organizations. The triads run it throughout most of Asia. A lot of the people doing the actual scams, they're slaves. They're doing it because of gambling debt or because they've been sold into slavery. If they don't meet their quotas, they often kill them. There have even been reports of them killing them in Asia and then using them for organ harvesting, like taking their organs and selling their organs in the black market. Like, it is a dirty business. A lot of the governments in these countries honestly don't care. The hard reality of a lot of the world is criminality is part of their economy. I know it's hard for Americans to understand this, but like a lot of Latin America, criminality is part of the system. It's part of the GDP. In a lot of Asia, criminality is part of the system. It's part of the GDP. Some countries are entirely black market countries. Iran's mostly black market. North Korea is a mostly black market country, just as examples. Some countries in Latin America are mostly black market. Ecuador, 25% of their economy is remittances. You know what I mean? Like, when you start understanding the world this way, you start understanding the intensity of criminality and how big it is and why the governments don't want to do anything about it. So the Trump admin right now, working with the State Department, the FBI, and the Justice Department, saying they're going to start taking down these scam networks. They're starting in Southeast Asia. You know, India would be South Asia. Southeast Asia would be like Vietnam, Burma, Cambodia. We'll see if that eventually includes India, but right now they're saying Southeast Asia. But a lot of those would be the ones the Chinese are involved with. So my take personally, they're actually going after the triad-connected scam centers first, and we'll see where it goes from there. They'll probably use threats of sanctions and tariffs against the countries if they don't cooperate and help take them down.
What an ugly, friggin' dark world. Josh, outstanding as always. Thank you, brother. All right. Allie Beth Stuckey is going to join us next. She always has a variety of cultural issues she wants to discuss. Before we get to her, let me talk to you about this. Free-falling testosterone is a crisis beyond belief. The fact that American men have lost 50% of their testosterone in the last 50 years is one of those ugly, uncomfortable subjects that we have to address. And it's in the water. What do you do when there's something in the water that's hurting you? It's in your bottled water, by the way. Estrogen. We're drinking it. We're showering in it. And it's turning us effeminate, weak, depressed, sad. We don't have to live like this. You shouldn't live like this. You can handle this problem naturally with natural herbal supplements from Chalk. I take a male vitality stack every single day, and you should too. I have never felt better in my entire life. I've been taking it for 4 years. I have so much energy. Go find out what it's about. Chalk.com/JesseTV. We'll be back.
As Christians, we're supposed to follow Jesus' 2 commandments, to love God and love neighbor. And there was no exception to that second commandment. Love thy neighbor regardless of race or gender or sexual orientation or immigration status or religious affiliation. And so in Texas, I'm constantly battling Christian nationalism, a bill that forces every public school teacher to put up a poster of the 10 commandments, a bill that replaces school counselors with untrained chaplains, a bill that would have taught Christian Bible stories as historical fact to our youngest students. And I always speak up on behalf of my Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, Sikh, agnostic, atheist neighbors because I, as a Christian, we as Christians, are called to love them as ourselves. And forcing my religion down their throats is not love. And the only thing I'll add, America is not a Christian nation.
I just want to say James Tallarico's problems are going well beyond the poll numbers here in Texas. A man who has campaigned exclusively on manipulating the Word of God to tell people that Jesus wouldn't want you to read the Ten Commandments and he would love for you to have an abortion is a man who's going to burn in hellfire. Joining me now, Allie Beth Stuckey, host of the wonderful Relatable. Allie, like I just said, the guy's not going to win an election. I'm not sure he's going to get out of his primary, but my goodness, is that the least of his concerns? He's playing with fire.
Oh, so true. I mean, in more ways than one. To say, I mean, there's so many issues. There's so many ways that I could address this. I mean, first of all, the last thing he said, America is not a Christian nation. How dare we teach kids about what is written in the Bible? How dare we show them the Ten Commandments? You can't understand Western civilization. You can't understand the foundation of America, the history of the United States, without understanding the Ten Commandments, without understanding basic biblical principles. This used to be something, even in public education, that we just knew. Whether or not you believe that the Bible is the inerrant Word of God, understanding it as the most influential piece of literature, as Jesus as the central figure in all of history, was necessary to understanding the world around us in the country that we live in. And so that's just an anti-education, anti-history take that he has there. But of course, all of the other problems with his definition of love. His definition of love is not sharing God's truth with people. His definition of love is allowing them to go further and further into ignorance, away from the gospel, which is that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. I would love to know what his definition of love is. I guess it's the allowance and the celebration of all kinds of sin.
Allie, I think a lot of people, no matter what their belief system is, a lot of people do not appreciate how wonderful we have it, because we do have a Christian-based society started by Christians. They just don't appreciate it because that's all they've ever known. We look across at the pond at the way women are treated like cattle and the way everything is stolen all the time, and we look at them as barbarians, and they certainly are, but we don't fully appreciate why that doesn't take place here, why that's not a thing here, why that's abnormal here. People don't understand the why, and the why is really important.
Yeah, so true. I was just talking about this on my show. I mean, people take for granted something like property rights, and they just assume that happens everywhere, that what is mine because I bought it and someone else doesn't have a right to it. Well, that is not a right or a concept that most people have actually in most of the world today. And you mentioned just the treatment of women and children. Well, 2,000 years ago, Christianity changed how the world saw children. In the pagan world, children were treated as animals, as barbarians. Infanticide, abortion, child sexualization was rampant, and it was totally justified philosophically by this idea that they just didn't possess the fullness of what it meant to be human. And we still see that in the non-Western world today. I mean, we still see that in a lot of ways in America today, but this justification of treating women and children as subhuman. The only reason we have this concept of human rights is because of the Imago Dei, this idea that all people are made in God's image and therefore we have equal worth. And that is what our rights, our founding documents were built on. And when we remove the Christian foundation, you don't have chivalry anymore. You don't have rights. You don't have extra compassion for these categories of vulnerability like women and children and the poor. All of these things that liberals say they love and they cherish, their source is found in the thing they hate, and that is Christianity.
Allie, talk to me about toxic empathy, because I see this, and I certainly see it with young women who are obviously naturally mothers. That's the way God created them, and I see their motherly instinct being twisted into the most depraved, disgusting, evil things in the world, and I don't think a lot of people realize what's happening.
Yeah. You know, before I even talk about toxic empathy, I'll talk about this other concept that I've been talking about on my show for a couple of years, and that is misplaced mothering, exactly what you're talking about. That all of us as women have this motherly instinct, whether or not we become biological moms. Like, as far back as we can remember, we loved dressing up our Barbies. I have 3 girls myself. Every object in our home becomes a baby or becomes a family, whereas with my nephews, every object becomes a gun. And so you see the differences so early on between boys and girls. And that doesn't just go away. Even if you become a high-powered career woman, that natural nurturing instinct will be channeled somewhere. And my argument is that when it's channeled not in the right direction, not towards children, whether they're your biological children or whether it's children that you volunteer with or care for in some way, when that mothering instinct is channeled towards politics, when it's channeled towards your profession, when it's channeled toward plants or channeled towards pets, then it gets perverted into something that actually makes women very bitter and very angry. And they have this mama bear instinct, especially with politics, where the illegal alien becomes their child. The woman seeking an abortion becomes their child. And we know as mama bears that we would do anything to stop our child from being harmed in some way. And I think that's why we see so much cruelty, so much anger. You think of someone like Renee Good, who is willing to run over a police officer. Like, it's that mama bear instinct, but channeled in these very wrong directions that justifies this anger and cruelty and bitterness in so many of these liberal women. And yes, toxic empathy is a part of that. Empathy becomes toxic when it leads you to affirm sin or validate lies or support destructive policies. Misplaced mothering and toxic empathy go hand in hand.
Allie, you are the best. Come back and see us again soon. I appreciate it. We've talked about that many times on this show before, haven't we? This is what they do, and this is why you need to be so, so careful with your daughter. Not that you shouldn't be careful with your son, but they want your daughter because of her instincts and because they feel like they can divert her instincts into something truly terrible, from something wonderful to something truly terrible. Be careful where you send your baby girl to college. Very, very, very careful, all right? Be careful with your stomach, too. Your gut health. It does matter. It is a big deal. What are you doing with your belly? What are you doing for your belly? Does your stomach get upset? I can't eat this anymore. Do you get heartburn at night? Look, I'm asking because I went through it all and I denied it all. No, I'm fine. I can eat anything. No, everyone gets heartburn every now and then. I've done all that, but are you going through it? Have you been proactive about it at all? Try some cowboy colostrum. Pour a little in your coffee, mix it up. I use chocolate. Pour it in the milk. I mean, it's delicious. You're going to love it. I haven't had heartburn since I started taking it. It was recommended to me by my sister. Best thing I've ever started in my life. Cowboycolostrum.com. Use the code JESSETV. We'll be back. All right, it's time to lighten the mood. I have always honored special needs parents, special needs people. It's a difficult thing to go through in life. There's no question about it. But the genuine love you see there, it's hard not to make your heart swell. I saw this video on the internet the other day, and I'm telling you what, man, it's just one of the greatest things I've ever seen in my life. One of these special needs races, and the kid just stops mid-race to come over and say hi to his mom. It's friggin' wonderful. I'll see you tomorrow.